consciousness in action, and you are taking action into your consciousness by tuning into Contact Talk Radio.
And on TuneIn.com, Hing.fm, and UpSnap Mobile.
Contact Talk Radio.
Welcome to Life Mastery with Todd Allen, the talk radio show that dives into the science of higher consciousness. Join Todd and his guests weekly at 10 a.m. Pacific Time and learn how to live a peaceful life with intentional mastery. Enjoy a survey of inspiring topics such as abundance, intention, health, manifestation, love, and transformation. It's all right here. Leading authors, speakers, coaches, entrepreneurs with stories and messages to support your well-being, let alone your most evocative dreams.
Hey, it's another groovy day, and most of you know, but I'm going to tell you anyway. That's because I make it that way. When I get up in the morning, before my feet hit the ground, I already made up my mind that it's going to be a groovy day. And you know what? 99 times out of 100, it turns out to be the grooviest day of all. Things happen. Something might come along, and I always just have to think back and say, hey, I started out groovy. We can make this groovy no matter what has to turn around, change, or be redirected. And it always works. So that's what I do. Welcome to Life Mastery Radio, the grooviest talk show you'll ever come across. And the talk show that gives you thoughts and ideas for you to use on your very own life mastery journey. Before we get started, we have an awesome guest for you today, but let's get ourselves a little centered and situated. And I always like to just think about what it is that I tap into. What is it that gives me power? What is it that I think about or connect to and get solace from? It could be God, it could be Allah, it could be the dude, could be the doorknob that leads you to the outside world, the tree, anything. But think about what it is that you connect to. We all have something. We all have something inside us that we connect to that gives us power. So focus on that just for a minute. And let's take in a deep breath. All the way down. And just let that breath out with a big ah. And just focus on that connection. Let it flow up through your heart center, throat chakra, speaker box, and out into the universe, and really connect to it. Let's do that one more time. But this time, think about your dreams, visions, and goals. What is it that you aspire to do, be, and have? And we're getting really close to the end of this chapter, so you might want to focus on what's going to happen next year, because you can make it happen. So think about that. What is it that you want to be, do, or have? In with a deep breath. And then just another ah, and let that flow out of the speaker box, out into the universe. And here's the deal. Now, all you have to do is allow the universe the opportunity to make it come true for you. Head up, chin out from between your legs, like a little puppy dog, just waiting for those opportunities to come your way, because they're coming. They will come if your head's up. So keep an eye out for those. Hi, Jackie. You're back from vacation. Oh, my goodness. Did you have fun?
I'm back, and it was delightful.
Where's the suntan? You didn't get suntan.
I was very careful. When I had shade, I stayed in the shade, but to enjoy the beach, I slathered on all kinds of sunscreen and protected myself well. First day, bought a hat, so I had that as well. Anyway, we had fun.
What was your favorite beach?
Well, let's see. We had ports in Aruba, Curacao, and Amber Cove in the Dominican Republic. And I have to say that Curacao had the best beach where we went. It was called Mambo Beach. And it was nice because they had built this little rockery beyond this swimming area. So it kept the breakers from all the big boats from coming in and making the waves too big to really enjoy. But you could swim back and forth between, the beach and where that rockery had been built. So you could still have lots of fun, but the water was just this beautiful green, blue, and
cool. Get a mask?
Gorgeous. Pardon me?
You get a mask and snorkel?
You know what? I'm not a fan of snorkeling.
That's oh my
There's something psychologically triggered when I breathe underwater. I just don't understand how that's supposed to happen. And it frightens me. It takes me a while to not feel fearful. And I'm thinking, I should not be out here swimming if I'm feeling fear. So, besides, I'm not a real strong swimmer. So I could do it if I had like one of those noodles, floating noodles, or some sort of a kickboard or something like that. But if I don't have that, it's just too.
Was the sand really coarse? I mean, was it really big and coarse?
In Aruba, it was powdery white sand. It was wonderful.
Yeah.
In Curacao, it was a little bit coarser. There was actually shells that you could, full shells that you were sometimes walking on. So, and then in Amber Cove in the Dominican Republic, we actually didn't get near the beach. There was a swimming area, very large pool, and a river that you could float on. And then they had 2 water slides and a zip line over the park. So we played basically in the pool on that day. But really
See
fun.
your smile, you had a blast.
Yes. And it was a great ship. We were on the Carnival Magic, and full basketball court, 2 water slides. They had this infinity deck where it was just adult only, and you find these little rattan pods that you could just hang out in all day, and it was really great.
And the food is amazing. And
the food, see, I have such restriction in my diet that after a couple of days, I was not feeling very well because I was having to figure out how to sacrifice one thing to have another thing so that I, didn't have all these bad things at once, until I finally found out that I could talk with the chef. So there was this mediator, her name was Olga, and I met Olga and was telling her about these situations, and she goes, I'm going to get the chef right over here and we're going to talk to him personally. So after that, all I had to do was show up, and Chef Raj or the sous chef, whose name was Katut, they would have something prepared for me that I could eat. And it was wonderful. So I didn't have to wait in any buffet line or anything like that. And it turned out to be great. Every morning they had a smoothie ready for me. And so it was great.
You get pampered on those things. That's pretty cool that they were, because I was thinking about that while you were gone. I was like, the food is just amazing, and there's just a bunch of it, but I know she has a special diet. So I wonder how that's going to work. But
they were so kind. They kept saying, oh, you are our special guest. You are. In fact, they started calling me the lady in the glasses. They'd go back to the chef and they'd say, the lady in the glasses is here.
That's cool. Well, I'm glad you had a blast. And for you to be bold and take the risk during these times to go on a cruise, I know that was tricky and that was complicated, but I hope it was all worth it, because it is very cool. And to see that part of the world, those beaches and the water,
the really special part about it, yes, I had to go through I had to be fully vaccinated, and I had to be tested 48 hours before boarding the boat. I had to wear a mask inside the ship, but not outside. And all of that, you kind of just get used to it. But what was really cool is going to these small islands in the Caribbean where they have been hit so tremendously hard by COVID, because tourism was their major thing.
Yeah.
So when all these cruise ships stopped and people couldn't travel any longer, it was very sad to see so many businesses close, houses just falling down, people unable to live in them anymore. And so the best part for me was being able to help with that economy a little bit, to go in there and help them to bring it back.
That's cool. That's very insightful on your part too. That's pretty cool. Well, you're back in the groove. Speak Feed Leads launched. You got it cooking. Anything happening with that you want to tell us about or mention?
We got classes starting next week, and some more classes starting first part of December. So we're always starting new things. Get your kids involved. Give them skills in speaking, conversation, podcasting, and really help them to feel confident and courageous and even competent in all of the skills they need to be successful.
Yeah, the return on investment will last a lifetime. You just can't. Check it out. Go check out Jackie, check out her program, and get your kiddos involved. It's like waking up their heart. And giving them a voice, and they'll be changed. They'll be forever changed.
Yep.
All righty. I want to remind our listeners that today's show page is at www.lifemasteryradio.net or .com, whichever one you prefer. prefer, you can go there, find any links that we talk about on the show today. And I believe our guest has a free gift. So we'll put that link up there, and it will also be in the newsletter. So if you don't want to miss anything, sign up for our newsletter. Jackie creates a newsletter every week, and it talks about who's been on the show, who's coming on the show, and of course, her blog post about the show, what she got from it. I'm always amazed at her insights, and it's a great way to review what we did on the show, because there is no script. Jackie and I have no script. We have some really cool guests, and we just have a discussion. That's what the show is all about, and it's designed just for you, to give you great thoughts and ideas. While you're there, check out our books. I have a book. Jackie has a book. Here's my book. The links are there to go to LifeMat or go to Amazon, and you can purchase those books and love them and tell us what you thought. There you go, Jackie. I think, are you ready for the show?
I'm so ready, because I met Janine, our guest, several months ago. She and I had a great conversation, and we have this connection because she's had some trauma, I've had some trauma, but she's really working on helping people to heal from that. So I admire her mission. So let me tell you about her, okay? Janine Naus is an internationally recognized grief and trauma relief specialist. She's a certified life, spiritual, and energetic coach. And she's a certified care trauma practitioner. And CARE is an acronym for calm, accepting, resilient, and empathetic. So she does that. And she's also a multiple #1 international best-selling author. In fact, she has several works out there. She works with women who are suffering due to trauma. She supports them on their journey to a fulfilling and joyful life, and is featured in a international best-selling book called The One Thing Every Mom Needs to Know. Sounds intriguing. She's also the author of the Creating Heaven Wherever I Am book series, which focuses on self-help topics. She is the creator of the Stop Suffering Now system. There's a system, which focuses on the foundational strategies needed to move past grief and trauma, and the Make Peace with Your Past system, which supports the delicate and difficult yet necessary process of accepting and peace, acceptance and peace with your past, so that you can move forward in a positive and healthy way. You know, right now, we are all traumatized in some way. We're all suffering from grief. And so this is going to be a fabulous guest today. Get your friends to tune in with us, because Janine is going to give us lots of insight that will help us all to heal. So please welcome Janine Naus. Woo! Great to have you with us, Janine.
Thank you, Jackie, so much. And Jackie and Todd, thank you so much for inviting me to speak here on Life Mastery Radio, and giving me this opportunity to share about relief from grief and trauma. It's an honor to be here today, and to be able to uplift and empower people who've experienced the physical, the sexual, the emotional abuse, catastrophic event, types of trauma, and they're looking for some form of relief. And thank you so much for this wonderful introduction. I wholeheartedly love what both of you do. You're so inspirational and informative for people all around the world. I love it. So I'm really happy.
We need that in writing too.
Thank you.
Well, it's a human thing. It's a human thing, right, Janine? I mean, trauma and grief, we're all going to experience it in one form or another, all throughout our lives. So this isn't anything that should surprise us, but there are things that can happen, or that we can do to ease the pain or ease our way through it.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's important to know that, because we can move through trauma, and no matter how difficult it is, there's steps that we can take to help us move through. And this connection, and I'll talk a little bit about this, maybe a little later on, this connection between grief and trauma. So, yeah.
Well, I think that a lot of people don't recognize trauma is what they're going through, especially during a pandemic, or when they've lost a job, or they've lost loved ones. Sometimes we don't think of that as trauma, but isn't it trauma to our physical self, our mental self, our emotional self, spiritual self. I mean, isn't it trauma that we're going through?
Yes, it's associated with a loss. It's just a loss of something, that was a part of our lives, and that can be traumatic in its own nature. And even though there are specific definitions of, different types of trauma, there's a traumatic aspect of different things that we experience. It can be divorce, and of course, like you shared with a job loss, and the loss of a loved one, and so it's all of it is very traumatic. So yeah.
And so tell us, you've got this picture behind you. I think it is a picture of you as a baby. Tell us a little bit about why that's important to your healing process and what you maybe have had to heal from.
Yeah, it's that picture is something that my mother had given me, and my amazing coach suggested I put it behind my shoulder. That way, when I'm on a call with my clients, I can look back, because I hear some really traumatic and sad and difficult stories, from the differing clients that I work with, and people that come to me to share their stories and connect. And so they, for me, it's a reminder of that happy baby. We all came into this world just beaming, and sometimes life brings on, these difficult experiences, but we can come back to that. We can come back to that happy self. It's already within us. So that's what it's there, to remind me. And it seems like every time I do speak to somebody, they're like, "Is that you?" Yes, there sure is.
Well, you were awfully cute.
Aren't we all? Yeah. Well, so
Yeah.
let's dig down in trauma just a little bit, and it's something we all experience. It's something we all go through. Is there a process that you've identified, or that people have identified, that stages or steps? Everybody's different. Some people take a lot more time to step through a process, or is there a process?
Well, are you talking in terms of the grief or the grief and trauma? And so, in my mind, there are differing steps, because everybody's journey through healing is very unique and different to themselves, based on their experiences and their ability to process all these emotions, because that's one of the biggest things that people are struggling with, is how complex this is for themselves. And so it's like with grief, there's these 7 steps that are kind of common with grief, but there is no, you go from step 1, 2, 3, 4, now, I walk people through, a 5-step process, a 3-step process in my work, but it's not designed. I do that very individualistically. Now in a group setting, I, then use that and, bring in a bunch of different things that help somebody understand different aspects of healing. And so that way they can choose, because that's one of the things we're so, when we experience trauma, we feel like we have no choice of what's gone on. And sometimes we don't realize, we get so stuck in what's going on in our mind that our heart is trying to tell us something. We feel it in our bodies. And, and it's, we're given all these messages to help us take that step. And sometimes it's just one step. So, and, that leads to the next step and the next step. So, yeah. And, I'd be happy to, talk about.
Well, what is the first step? So some, I just ran into this yesterday. A friend of mine's going through a relationship thing, and the comment was made, well, I don't know how to just let it be. I don't know how to just be okay with myself. I don't know how to get that person out of my head. I just don't know. I'm broken. I just can't do this. What would you say to a person like that?
Yeah, well, they can move through it. So what I like to talk about is like this 5-step process for moving past trauma. And so, what they would need to do is in step 1, they're really looking at the why, so
That's cool. Yeah.
yeah, so and this is because we get in step 1 we would get stuck in that place of grief, but we really need to remember your why, because coping with that traumatic event is difficult, and so you're probably experiencing a wide range of emotions, and that can include things like anger and frustration and sadness, and possibly you may feel like you're not really ready to address all those difficult emotions. Sometimes they come at you pretty suddenly, and so then you need to find a way to move forward, because there needs to be that next step for you. And
so with the why, so this is interesting. This is really cool, but why is a big question to ask. Is there a focus? Why this? Why me? Why this person? Why am I going through this? Why am I feeling this way? Or is it all of them?
Well, eventually it becomes sort of all of it, but you start with some of the smaller things. You start looking at things, from more of a, what it is that you can process in that moment, and then you just keep building upon that why, and you kind of understand more what it is. It's coming into an awareness, because awareness is key to healing, and so as you understand something, understand your trauma and its impact on you, then you have an opportunity to take the next step. So and we all know that inside of us, and that we can't avoid some of these feelings that we're experiencing forever, but sometimes that we go through this period where we feel like our body is kind of floating outside of us, in the world above, and and so when trauma happens, we feel like our world's been torn apart, and so, and they don't feel like you're a part of it anymore. And so I just want people to know that they can move forward, and they won't be stuck in this place forever. So
Even though it feels like it, right?
Yes,
I mean,
exactly.
they are so stuck that they think this is going to be forever.
Yes, absolutely. And so when you ask yourself these why questions, you're going to,
Introspection.
yeah, it's exactly. So it's really coming back to yourself, because we're so used to looking outside of ourselves as to why this happened, why that happened. And when we come back into ourselves, we can start seeing things differently, and so we start understanding what's our purpose, what's our reason, why are we here on this earth and at this time, and because all of us are here for a reason, and so when we come to that awareness, then you can sit there and look at what's going on with this trauma from a different light. So
And isn't it true that many times, especially in a grief situation, it's normal to feel anger at the person that has passed on, right? It's not something that we think we should be feeling, because why would you be angry at somebody that has died? But isn't that an important emotion to allow yourself to feel?
Yes, we bury our feelings. And feelings get so stuck in our body we don't even realize it sometimes, and so we're afraid to confront some difficult feelings. We're afraid to say, I feel miserable, I feel sad, I feel angry. I don't want to feel angry. Why am I feeling so angry? And what it is it's just energy that needs to move through your body. It needs to move out. You need to express it. Say, I feel angry, and let it out, and not hold it in. Because then what happens? It's sort of like that peeling back the onion. So as you get into all those difficult emotions and you start opening up, you start bringing light to what it's there. It's just simply energy trying to move through your body.
That's a great way to look at it. Energy trying to move. And where does the blame game come in? I mean, it's really easy to blame ourselves, right? And we take all that blame and all that shame, and that's just like a snowball, right? That just adds fuel to the fire.
Yeah, I know in my own personal experience, I struggled a lot with shame, and from the traumas I've experienced, I experienced childhood sexual trauma, so it was very, very difficult for me, and so we blame ourselves. We blame ourselves, like, I was a 5-year-old little girl, but would a 5-year-old girl really should be to blame for what happened? No, not, but we put these thoughts in our minds, and they get kind of all messed up. And so then we don't know how to process that feeling that we have. And it's scary to feel vulnerable. It's scary to open up and look at it and reveal what it is that it's trying to tell us. Because when we feel it in our body, it's just a message that it needs some form of attention.
The energy needs to move. I
Correct.
love that. That is so cool. The energy needs to flow. We need to release that or do something fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I know that for me, sometimes I don't want to give in to pain because I feel like it will control me that way. Right. So I try to just maintain this strength to get through something. And maybe emotionally, that's not really what we should be doing.
Right.
Is because I guess if you felt like you were going to get out of control with your emotions,
Right.
That could be pretty scary, right?
Yes, it can be. And, we have a tendency to want to control. All of us, we want to control the outcome of what's going on. But, the reality is we have no control.
We have no control.
And it's hard to accept that sometimes. And it's like, what do you mean I have no control? And, and what it is when you come into awareness and understand that you have no control, you learn how to, rather than react to the situation, respond to it. You start thinking of better answers, a better way to move forward. And, rather than get caught up in all the emotional baggage that comes along with that reaction to what it is we can't control. And and we try to control our emotions, it's like, keep blowing up that balloon, keep blowing it up and blowing it up, and we feel it gets tighter. The skin of that balloon gets tighter and tighter. Sometimes it's just going to go poof, and so it's like, well, you want to let it flow. You want to say, okay, I am angry and it's okay to be that way. I am sad, it's okay. And witness it. Just simply witness those feelings, witness those thoughts that come along with those feelings. And so that way you can express it and understand that it's just simply there, and then allow it to move on. And oftentimes one of the things I like to do is replace it with a better thought, a better because if I have a better thought, I feel a lot differently. So if I start thinking of something from a different perspective, and you could take something like
Like your baby picture, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, okay, I can get caught up in the thoughts of what I'm hearing, and it's sad, it's horrible. I feel kind of, compressed. But when I see myself on the other side as that happy baby, that's who we are already inside of us.
Yeah.
And and as I always talk about, it's all about coming back home to love. And it's who we are. We're love. So. Yeah.
Why then is the first step to healing from grief and trauma? What's the second step?
Let's see. The second step, it's let me see if I can get to this. So I like to ask clients to focus on the bare minimum, so that they don't get overwhelmed. So it's really important that we all have some kind of a bare minimum that we need to just be able to, even do the tiniest things to help us step forward. And, so take, for example, let's say you don't have children, and then maybe you can stay in bed and not shower and let a few days go by and just kind of be in that space. But it's a little different, obviously, when you're a mom. So it's not gonna, it's not gonna be the same. So, but you're gonna have to find ways to do the bare minimum to ensure that some of the basic needs get done. But when you're a mom, it's not just for yourself, but also for your kids, so that they can be loved and fed and clothed and educated. And even in that situation, it's okay if you go ahead and, let's say you ask your sister to come over and maybe drop off some food, or you could ask a neighbor to pick up the kids from school for a few days, just to give you that reprieve. So you're just doing the bare minimum. You don't have to cook. Order pizza every day for a week if you need to. Just stick to the bare minimum, and that's how you get what you need to get done. And it will get done in time. So there's, we don't have to get so caught up. I thought I turned that off. Sorry about that.
It happens.
Yeah.
So then it becomes
could have been
important.
a phone call from God, really. I mean,
Yeah.
who else could be making that kind of noise when it's supposed to be shut off, right?
Yeah. I know. I don't know how that always happens, but it does.
Yeah. So Janine, it sounds then like it's important too to be able to ask for help,
Yes.
which can be really hard, right?
Yeah.
That we're so involved in the pain that we're feeling, the recovery process that we're going through, that it often feels difficult to ask for help, but
Mhm.
we need to, sounds like, so that we can keep concentrating on our healing, right?
Exactly. And when we ask, I know that can be difficult, but at the same time, it's a big relief, so to know that you have somebody, because it kind of it's all about that connection, so if we know that somebody, our best friend, we can pick up the phone and say, hey, can you help me out here? I need a little break here. I need to, take care of myself, do some self-care. And when they step in, that makes you feel so much better, knowing that there is someone there. Because sometimes we think we're all alone, and we're not. We're never alone. And just going out and reach out to the people who are willing to take that step for you and help you move through. And they don't have to get involved in what's going on, or that kind of stuff. You can hold boundaries to that conversation. So look, I can't talk about it right now, but I just need the space for myself right now. So yeah.
But it is good to talk about it though, right? If you
Yeah,
got
it is.
somebody that you can trust, and just, I mean,
yeah, if you're in that position, but if you're kind of stuck and you really want to be alone,
right.
even in that space, you're not alone, because I feel there's that higher power. There is something, there is a connection happening. So I kind of look at it from that bigger view, where, if you recognize that, then you can safely say, when I'm ready, I'm going to have this conversation. But
and everybody's different, right? This takes
a
little time. It takes big time, but people, I guess what I'm trying to get at is people need to take action. They need to keep moving forward, right? I mean, it's just not wallowing in grief 100%.
Yeah, that is a game changer when you take action. And I like to refer to it as inspired action, because you're connecting and connecting at your source, whoever that is that you believe in, like you were talking at the top of the hour. And it's like, ground yourself, connect with that, connect and know that you can get through, so
faith, hope, grace.
Yes.
And for those listeners out there who might be the one who gets the phone call and says, the other person on the line is saying, I need your help today. Can you do this and this for me? It doesn't have to be grand gestures most of the time. It's the small things, right? It's picking a child up from school, or grabbing some takeout to take over to the person, or just going and sitting with them and holding their hand. I mean, it doesn't have to be a grand gesture, just any small gesture helps that person who's going through the trauma and the grief, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
So step 3 then, what would that be? We've got the why, know your why, or ask the why questions, do the bare minimum for yourself, and then
it's give yourself grace, and then eventually moves into space. So yeah, it's so in other words, when you're taking that step, you want to keep your mind on whatever process that you're doing, and to be gentle with yourself. So let's say, go back to the mom example. and they're, you know, trying to get your kids off to school, and they need to get their lunches packed, you know, and you know, just take that deep breath, and then talk to yourself as you move through the process. And so in your head, you're saying, I'm walking to the kitchen, I'm opening that refrigerator door, and I'm taking out the bread, and I'm taking out the turkey, and I'm making a sandwich, and you know, you get the idea. So when you focus on steps in the process, you know, this goes back to what I was talking about, action. And then, you know, notice I'm using words like I am and I'm not going to. So you want to, you know, when you're concentrating on the bare minimum, and then using the process to help you move through, and you're giving yourself some grace, you know, to move through what it is you're experiencing, you open a door to the possibility of seeing things from a different light, calming down what's going on in the mind, and you know, and being in that comfort zone. So
you talked
yeah.
a little bit about that earlier, and I want to just kind of highlight that, and that's the third party perspective, right?
Yeah.
You claimed it as being a witness, and I was taught, yeah, just go like a little bit out here and take a look. What are you witnessing? What are you seeing? What are you hearing? What are you feeling? And don't get involved in it so much, but just witness it. That's kind of a big thought. How is there a process that you have people do to get in that? I mean, a lot of people can't get that concept.
Yeah, it's you know, it's kind of interesting. It's sort of like sitting there, and you know, because it's all about being in the present moment. And, you know, which is really, really important for that to happen. So witness what is going on in this moment, is allowing yourself to ask that question. What am I feeling? What am I thinking? What am I doing? You know, and as you are observing that, you know, then you can, you know, just name it for what it is.
Right.
You know, and not let it define who you are, because it's not necessarily who you are. You know, it's a feeling, it's energy, it's, you know, the thoughts, you know, that are coming through that, and thoughts change. And so when you are witnessing your thoughts, you have the opportunity and the choice to change them.
That is so powerful. And that's a concept I didn't get until I was, gosh, in my mid 40s, I think. And I can remember exactly where I was when I figured out that I could do that. And it just blew me away. And I can remember it just as vivid as it was yesterday. It was many years ago, but that is powerful in understanding that you can turn those off. You can change them. You can redirect them. And a lot of us don't have that concept. We think, you know, my mind's just racing. It's going and it's out of control. I can't, but you can get control of it.
I heard a great tip the other day from someone who it's talked about how to change your mind and then change your actions. So I can't remember who it was now, but she said, I think in my head, I have decided to ... because. So in a situation where you're experiencing grief or trauma, you might say, and taking care of yourself, you might think, okay, I'm going to go to the kitchen and get a glass of, I've decided I'm going to go to the kitchen and get a glass of water, because if I get dehydrated, I'm not going to feel well, or something like that. And so you just, this is the decision I'm making. I'm going to go take that action. And this is the reason that I'm doing that. And simply by making that intention, it changes the energy that you have.
That's the same as Janine's I am statement, right? Janine, the I am is also it's godly, right? When we state I am, we are stating a connection to the all.
Yes.
Tell us more about that. Tell us more about it.
The creating heaven wherever I am is like my book series I was talking about, and or that you brought up earlier on in the conversation here, and so the I am, it's, you know, it's our connection, it's you. I look at that as the solution. I can remember when I was when I had the this book title, and a marketer said, "Well, what is the solution?" It's the I am. It's you are the person who helps move through, and it's your connection to that higher power, that godly sense. You could sit there and have names where you're defined as, I am a mother, I am a teacher, I am this, I am that, and you have all those descriptors, but it's who you really are on the inside. It's what's here in the heart. And, and that's, and I look at that and I want to see if I can remember. There was a quote, I have it up on my webpage. I'd like to pull it up here for a second, that makes me remember this, and was instrumental in terms of, one of the things that I do in my book is about everything we do in life. It's about creating, to experience, and to love. And so there it is. I found it, and it was this is a book that I remember Dr. Wayne Dyer always talked about, and it was by Joseph S. Brenner, The Impersonal Life. And this is what I love. And I'll just go ahead and read the quote. She goes, "I am the tree of life within you. My life will and must push forth, but it will not do it by gradual and steady growth. But it will do it by gradual and steady growth." Sorry. "You cannot come into your fruitage before you have grown to it. Remember, my life is all the time building you up into the perfection of health and strength and beauty that must express outwardly as it is even now expressing within. And you have begun to realize I am within, but have not yet learned to commune with me. Listen and learn now." And I just love that quote. And I think about that, kind of put that in front of like programs when you step onto this journey, and you're not alone. Even when you choose to step on this journey to healing. And to me, it's just all kind of goes into it. It's how we want to create our lives, how we want to experience, how do we want to love, when this is what we came into this world to do. And then it's all about that coming back home to love.
That's really cool. And I think that with that, then recognizing that every time we have trauma or loss or pain, it's another opportunity to create ourselves differently with this new paradigm that now we're dealing with.
Yeah,
But
because
creation is a constant process.
Yes, and I think about creating, it's what you're doing now. Yes, we had that experience in the past, but that experience gave me lessons to create anew, to create more of what it is I desire in life. And so I say, okay, and I have a different relationship. I have a different way of expressing that story of the trauma. So I'm not triggered by what happened in my past. I'm ready to express what it is I really want to bring forward in my life, and also share that with others. So the whole idea is that when we connect with another person, we're also creating, experiencing, and loving. And so there's it's all that about oneness of all, so and then coming back
and
to
other
that.
people learn from our experience too, right?
Correct. Yeah.
That's our stories and our experience are what help other people along their path as well.
Right.
So what else can we find in your book? And how does that help our listeners to heal?
Well, there's the books themselves, both of the books are loaded with tools. So the first book, it's just kind of examining the differing topics, differing areas. And it kind of mirrors what my program's about, where like in, it's a 4-pillar program, but the first part, it's insight, impact, intuition, and implementation. And so with insight, there are 7 essential elements to expanding your awareness, because awareness is key to healing. And, so we'll look at things like be present. We'll look at your intuition. We're going to look at your self-empowerment, and all the strategies and tools. And so that's what the book does. It's an introduction to that whole process. I go into it much deeper, obviously, in my programs, but and then the second book is more about your opportunity to kind of journal, because I always find that when I put pen to paper, when I let my thoughts come out, I release what's going on, and I can come back and say, I may go back and read something I wrote several months ago, and that's where I was at that time, and I may not be in that same space. I may have experienced a growth, and it lets me know how much my life has changed for the better. And it was all about that choice I made. I chose to grab that pen. I chose to journal about what's going on. I chose to, step on a healing path and move in a direction of what it is I desire out of my life. Because, and I always think about, like, Dr. Wayne Dyer always talks about, back when he was alive, he talked about how every cell in his body is not the same cell from 10 years ago or any, because we just completely change. And when we know that we have that opportunity to do that, we create our own gifts, we share that with each other. And, and that's why we love to connect. I think back in the days of, the hunters and gatherers that got in circles, and so they would get together and, share about experiences and share about how they can move forward. So
Stories.
Yeah, our stories are so critical. And even though it may be a horrific and horrible story, you can learn to have a different relationship with that story. So
I'm so glad you said that, because I think it was vital for me in my healing process to share my voice, to use my voice to share my story.
Mhm.
And even though the story was painful to tell when I first began, every time I told the story again, I felt more and more healed from it.
Yeah.
And it became easier and easier to tell, and I became more courageous in telling it. And then I started to recognize the inspiring effect it was having on other people who were hearing my story and understanding what I had felt, because they had felt the same thing. And it was so meaningful to me when people would come up to me and say, I've had an experience like yours, and I never thought about doing this, or I never knew it was important to feel this, or whatever.
Mhm.
And so our voice, being able to find a way to verbalize our situation, is so vital. Do you agree, Janine?
Yeah, I totally agree. And, that, what it is, it's human nature to want to be heard. We all want to be heard. We want to know somebody acknowledges our presence here on the earth, in our life. We want that ability. And sometimes our stories are of pain, of suffering and hurt, but that's not all of life. So often our experiences are just a small fraction of our entire life, that we forget to look at everything else about our life and bring that story in. So, you take something like grief, and you let's say somebody had been died in a car accident or something like that, and so they were there, that person was there, very traumatic. So that's something that keeps running through one's head. And then that person that they loved had passed. And then what happens is, getting to that story of what we loved about that person, so that we can shift from that thought of that tragic day to remembering who that person really was, and getting into that space and recognize that there's a difference in how it feels. And you start to, this goes back to witnessing. So you're using your ability to witness what that means. And then, then you can kind of adapt a different way of how you want to tell your story. Yes, it was a tragic event, but this person was a loving and kind person. And when you bring that story forward, it's inspirational. It helps somebody who may also have a similar experience with grief. And, and I think that's why, they put a lot of people into grief circles. People come in and share their stories, and, but you don't want to get caught stuck in the story. So that's what's really critical. So you want to be able to share it and then come into a different relationship with what it was that you've experienced. So,
I'm sure you've worked with people that were stuck in their story, right?
Yeah, I was myself. For decades. Because I had a really horrific past. So yeah. And I don't know if you want me to share about that or.
Well, Janine, we only have about 5 minutes left.
Okay.
This hour has just flown by.
It
Oh my
did.
gosh. And I know that you have a free gift for our listeners. You want to take just a minute and tell them about that? And I think Jackie has the link. We're going to put it in our newsletter. It will be on the website, but tell us more. Entice me.
Oh, sure. What I'm offering is an opportunity to get a 30-minute call with me and to talk about one challenge that you're experiencing. And it's interesting because every time I do that offer, people want to say everything. You have 30 minutes, to take advantage of that opportunity. And, so what it does is you're going to get a strategy, a tool, or, we're going to have a discussion about what it is, that challenge and what you're experiencing to help you start taking steps to move forward and not be stuck in that one challenge, because so often it really is. But yes, there's layers and layers, because one of the things I find with going through a healing process is we have to unravel a lot, and something may come up later that we weren't aware of. So I kind of look at it as, did I graduate? Not necessarily, but I'm learning, and I'm learning how to cope and respond and do things differently. Look at it from a different perspective. Take everything I've learned, and some tool may work great today, or some tool may kind of like, oh, that's too hard to do. The nice part is there's that choice, so you can find a way to work through, because I found that if I have a myriad of tools in my hip pocket, that whatever it is I'm experiencing, I find a way to move through. So, something will creep up, but yeah. So, and then also what I'm going to give is a core beliefs guided visualization tools for my popular emotional resiliency toolkit. And so that's also going to be a gift along with this 30-minute call.
So look for that link. It'll be in the newsletter. It's on the website. Can they find that link somewhere on your website? Maybe tell us a little bit about your website.
Well, yeah, you can reach me at www.janinenaus.com, and you can reach out to me. You can sign up, and I also have a workbook that's part of that, and then we can connect, and I'll provide you the information. Just let me know that you heard me on this call, and so if, in case you missed it somewhere, or you listen to this call and you're not anywhere, you can WW the world. Just know that you can come back to my website and just connect with me, and then what I'll do is I'll share that gift with you, with the call and the guided core beliefs. And
you have a workshop coming up, or
yeah, I have it's a masterclass, and so that's coming up on December 8th, 9th, and 10th, and so. What did I do with it? I pulled you guys. So let me see here. Here, I thought I had the right one and I didn't. And so anyway, it's 3 steps to healing trauma. So that's the compressed title of it. But what I'm going to do is work through 3 steps. You're going to get strategies and tools on that call, and it's just chock full of helpful information. It's about a 35-40 minute call, and so I'm going to do it live each day, 8th, 9th, and 10th, and then you can also ask questions at the end. And yeah, and then I also have replay, so you don't have to be stuck with that particular day, but you can find that information on my website. So
that's JanineNaus.com.
Yes, Janine Naus.
Cool. Well, Janine, thank you so much for showing up as you today. And this was very insightful. I think I gained even more knowledge. And Jackie, any takeaways?
Yeah, I'm just so grateful, Janine, that you've taken your own tragedy, trauma, and grief, and you have turned it toward helping others to heal from theirs. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
That's about all we have time for today. I hope that you choose to go and check out Janine's website, check out her programs, check out her freebies, and check out her workshop. Lastly, please, please, please make it a great day, because it is all about choice. Bye-bye for now.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.